Hi guys, welcome back. We're now starting with price elasticity of supply, but before I move on to PES, I want to let you know that I've added a few things on this page today. Just go through it, and it's a few extracts from your course book. Just go through it. Now we have covered PED properly, as you can see. All this part of the course has been covered. PED is done, right? Demand supply PED. Where's PED? Yeah, PED is done. We're now moving on to PES, which is 2.8 of your syllabus. Now, guys, just like price elasticity of demand was telling us the responsiveness of quantity demanded to a change in price, the price elasticity of supply talks about how responsive producers are to price changes. We know that the supply curve is upward sloping, and it's upward sloping because it shows a positive relation between price and quantity supplied. And we studied that when the price of a good goes up, suppliers are quite excited because they sort of, they feel incentivized to actually produce more. Therefore, they would end up producing more because the higher price gives them an incentive to actually end up producing more. So they feel that it's worth it now to produce, and it's worth all the effort and investing in the factors of production and hiring and organizing them to actually produce more output. But the law of supply was actually silent on the fact that by how much, or by how much would the supply go up? What is the magnitude or the extent of the increase in quantity supplied following a rise in price? So let's say that if the price goes up by 10%, so will the quantity supplied go up by 10%? Will it go up by 20%? Or will it not go up by any percent, no change? Or will the quantity supplied go up by, let's say, 2% or what? So the answer to this question, that by which extent would the quantity supplied goes up, is not given by the law of supply. It is a part that is dealt by the price elasticity of supply. This is the price elasticity of supply course. The professor of price elasticity of supply is telling the law of supply professor that is not your job. It's my job. Send those kids to my class. I will teach them. So the price elasticity of supply, guys, shows the measures. It's a measure of the responsiveness of quantity supplied to a change in price. Definition number one. Another way to say it is that PES measures the extent to which quantity supplied changes when price changes. The formula for PES exactly this, just similar to the formula for PED. Just the changes that instead of quantity demanded, you will write quantity supplied. So PES is the percentage change in quantity supply divided by the percentage change in price, right? So just like you had elastic demand, inelastic demand, here also you have elastic supply and inelastic supply. If PES is greater than 1, the supply is elastic. If PES is less than 1, the supply is inelastic. Now let's see the percentage change in quantity supplied is calculated the same way as we calculated the percentage change in quantity demanded. We'll use the same formula, new minus old upon old times 100, but this time I'm not calculating these values because it's the same way, so there's no point in repeating those calculations. I have just written the percentage changes directly here, but it would be calculated the same way, right? Just like you calculated percentage changes in price and quantity demanded in the previous videos. So guys, as you can see over here, the supply curve, when the supply would be elastic, the PS would be greater than 1. And how will you draw an elastic supply curve? You will draw an elastic supply curve by starting the supply curve from the vertical axis like this. This is an elastic supply curve. And how are you going to draw an inelastic supply curve? Like this. So an elastic supply curve, guys, remember, has a flat slope. An elastic supply curve is flatter, like it has a flat slope, or it is flatter, like the slope is flatter. But when you draw an inelastic supply curve, which is drawn on your right, this is steeper. The slope is steeper in inelastic, and the slope is flatter in elastic. And the more flatter it gets, right, the more flatter it gets like this, the more elastic the supply gets. And the more steeper it gets like this, the more steeper it gets like this, the more inelastic the supply gets, right? So over here you can see that if the price is going up by 10%, the quantity supplied is increasing by 30%. And if I were to ask you that whether this supply is elastic or inelastic, just by looking at the diagram you can make sense that this is elastic supply, because you can clearly see that the extent of the increase in your quantity supplied is much more than the increase in price, right? So but still, let's put in the values. So the quantity supplied is going up by 30% plus 30% divided by plus 10%, which is the increase in price. So the answer is plus 3. Remember, guys, that the PES will always be a plus sign. PES will always be a plus sign because it is showing an a positive relation between price and quantity supplied. The sign is just showing the positive relation between price and quantity supplied, the positive relation, right? Now, what does the value plus 3 mean? So what does the value 3 means here? See, for every 10% jump in price or increase in price, the quantity supplied is going up by 30%. So the value of 3 means that for every 1% increase in price, which means that if producers get 1% more that they were getting from before, by producing and selling their product, they would be willing to increase the production and sales by 3%. They would be willing to, supply 3% more previously in the market. So this is showing a very good or high response by the producer. Producers are quite responsive to the price rise. And why would the producers be able to do that? I mean, and we'll study that in the factors affecting elasticity video, that what makes a supply elastic and what makes supply inelastic. So if the value is plus 3, it is greater than 1, it means supply is elastic, and the positive sign just shows the positive, the plus sign shows the positive relation. Coming to inelastic supply curve, which will be drawn steeper, it will be drawn steep. A good way is that you sort of the end point of the supply curve is basically touching the horizontal axis, right? And for elastic, it's on the vertical axis, right? The end point, or you can say you started from here like this, or if it's inelastic, you started like this. And the more inelastic it is, see, this is inelastic supply, but this is even more inelastic, and this, a vertical straight line, it makes supply perfectly inelastic. Got it? So as you can see from the face of the diagram as well, see, the diagram should reflect what you're trying to say. If you're saying that supply is inelastic, so this diagram should reflect, the diagram should shout on itself. By looking at the face of the diagram should speak for itself, that yes, I am inelastic supply. And if you look at this, you can clearly see the increase in quantity supplied is just by 10%. Only by 10% jump in quantity supplied. And you increase the price by 30%, but producers were not able to increase supply. Maybe they didn't really have the capacity or the raw materials available to increase supply. Now you might be questioning, what the hell, producers? What the hell are you guys doing? You're getting a 30% jump in price, but you're not increasing the quantity supplied. Well, producers isn't it? I mean, producers also have certain limitations, and we'll see in the video of the factors affecting price elasticity of supply, that what could be the possible reasons that supply is inelastic. But one possible reason is that maybe producers don't really have the capacity to produce or increase output by more than 10%. They can't really do anything about it. Maybe they don't have the labor or the raw material available. So the only maximum production they could do following a jump in the prices was by increasing production by only 10%. So if you plug in these values in the PES formula, PES equals to percentage change in quantity supplied divided by the percentage change in price. So the percentage change in quantity supplied, guys, the percentage change in quantity supplied, guys, is only 10% divided by 30%. So the answer would be plus 0.3, which means that the PES 0.3 is less than 1. So PES, whenever it will be less than 1, it will be inelastic, means that supply is less responsive proportionately to price changes. And the number 0.3 just means that, for every 1% increase in price, quantity supplied rises by only 0.3%. The supply is highly unresponsive at this point, so it's inelastic, right? Another way to say what PES is that PES shows, PS shows us the degree of responsiveness. It shows us the degree of responsiveness of. It shows us the degree of responsiveness of in quantity supplied to a price change. It shows us, right? It shows us the responsiveness in quantity supply to a price change. So guys, what is elastic supply? Elastic supply simply means that quantity supplied changes proportionately more than the change in price. So while you saying that quantity supplied producers are more responsive when the supply is elastic is correct, but then the technical way of saying it is, as in, if you're asked to define elastic supply, this is what you will write in the definition, that quantity supplied changes or rises proportionately more than the increase in price. Or if you're saying if you're saying quantity supplied rises, then use the word price rises. If you're saying quantity supplied changes, use the word price changes, because changes could be in either direction, increase or decrease. So quantity supplied changes proportionately more than the change in price, which means that if price goes up, quantity supplied goes up a lot. Not a lot. Now you won't say a lot. This is just for your own explanation, but it increases proportionately more. And if price goes down, quantity supplied decreases proportionately more, because change could be in either direction. which simply means that supply is more responsive to price changes as compared to when the supply is inelastic. It means that quantity supplied responds proportionately less than the change in price. Supply is less responsive to the price changes. Maybe producers were not able to increase supply because they didn't really have the resources, or they didn't really have the available capacity or any spare capacity available. So quantity supplied responds proportionately less than the change in price. For instance, let's say if you were to bring this up to my example, that let's suppose students usually come to us a week or 10 days before the exam, saying that we will pay you 3 times 10 times extra, just give us a few past paper classes, and we usually end up saying no to them because we don't really have the time to cater them or factor them in. Our schedules are quite packed a month before the exam, so supply is not elastic. Here it's just perfectly inelastic, but you can just make sense out of what I'm saying, that if you don't have the time and the capacity and the resources available, or any idle capacity available, you won't be able to do much about it, and you won't really be able to increase your output and services. And that is why the supply is usually one factor of this is one of the reasons why supply is usually inelastic. Now I've added an extract from your book, just go through it. You won't need me for this, you can just read it yourself. Now guys, coming back, we also need to look at three special cases of elasticity. Just like we studied perfectly inelastic demand, there is also perfectly inelastic supply. And what do you really mean by when you say perfectly inelastic supply? Perfectly inelastic supply, guys, is when the quantity supplied does not alter with price changes, and PES is equals to zero here. The value of the PES is zero because you see, if let's say the original price was P1 and the quantity was Q, let's say this was like 100 units, right? And now the price goes up from P1 to P2, it goes up by 20%, but still the production and supply is only 100 units. You're still supplying 100 units. And a good example of this could be, let's suppose you're sitting in a cinema, and cinema has fixed seats. So let's say a football stadium or a cricket stadium, and that cricket stadium or the cinema has only 100 seats available. So if more customers want to visit that place, once those 100 seats are filled, that's all that can happen. I mean, you can't really allow more than 100 people in the cinema, right? So even if you have a lot of people who are waiting outside willing to pay more, offering a higher price, or even if the market prices go up and people could pay more, but then you can't really do much about it because you don't really have the capacity. So if more people are demanding to, let's say, see a movie at a particular cinema, then if let's say you have a lot of more people, lots of more people outside in the line, then what will happen to ticket prices? Like if the demand is going up, the ticket prices will rise, but the supply is still the same. Let's say if I were to put this on a demand supply diagram, let's say this is the demand for the movie, but the supply of the movie would be fixed because only 100 people, and let's say the cinema ticket costs $100. But let's say suddenly the demand for the movie goes up and it increases to, let's say, from D1 it goes up to, let's say, D2. So the prices could, let's say, rise from $100 to, I don't know, maybe $120. So there's a 20% jump in prices, similar to the example that I was giving here, that prices go up by 20%. But still, even when demand goes up, but still the equilibrium stays at 100. Or equilibrium meaning that, I mean, the thing is that still only 100 people can watch and buy the movie. Initially, 100 people could watch and buy the movie, and the cinema people could sell their services for 100 people only, selling the ticket at $100. But now, when the demand for the ticket goes up, they're still only selling the ticket. They're still only selling 100 seats, and only 100 people could satisfy that demand. I mean, 100 people could only not satisfy the demand. 100 people could, I mean, more people could satisfy the demand, but only 100 people were lucky enough or could get the seat. But then the ticket prices went up, and the reason is because when demand goes up, the prices will go up. But that doesn't really mean that supply goes up as well. To what extent would supply go up depends upon whether the supply is elastic and how elastic or inelastic the supply is. And if supply is goddamn perfectly inelastic, then I mean, producers and firms are at the mercy. They can't really do much about it because the capacity of the cinema is fixed at 100 or capped at 100 units or 100 seats, you can say. So even if prices are going up, I mean, you can't really do much about it, right? So even if the demand goes up, let's say like this, if I were to put this now on this diagram, what this technically means is that even if demand goes up, you're still only 100 seats there. So I mean, the supply is perfectly inelastic. So although prices will rise in the market, and prices should rise, I mean, why not? Cinema producers must, or cinema sellers offering movie services must definitely increase the prices, because come on, man, so many people are demanding movies, that particular movie or whatever movies, then it's definitely just increase your prices. Similar, simple. But that's what perfectly inelastic supply is. So by definition, what you will say is that supply is perfectly inelastic means that quantity supply does not changes at all. Even when the price goes up, even when the price goes up, there's no change in quantity supplied. And obviously, in the formula, percentage change in quantity supplied divided by the percentage change in price, I mean, there's zero change in quantity supplied. Quantity supplied is still the same. So there's zero change in quantity supplied. So the PES has to be zero. Another example for is basically perfectly elastic supply. And perfectly elastic supply, again, for MCQs only, this is important. You must know that PES equals to infinity, infinite, and this means that when the change in price would I mean, perfectly elastic supply, you could say that, and you can write this down as I speak, right? It means that when a change in price will cause an infinite change in supply. So what you'll write is that you'll say that when a change in price, right, will cause an infinite, just learn this, it will cause an infinite change in supply, giving a PES of infinity. That's all that you need to learn. And this is more relevant for MCQs only. Now, guys, another thing that you need to learn is, and this is again for only relevant for MCQs, you're not going to be tested this in the theory paper unless and until they could even just ask you a definition. So if they ask you a definition, define elastic supply, this is the definition that you will write. If they ask you what is unitary elastic, this is what you will end up writing. But you still must know how to draw a unitary elastic supply curve. Again, just like unitary elastic demand, but in the case of a unitary elastic demand curve, we were drawing a rectangular hyperbola like this, but this is not how you draw a unitary elastic supply. The unitary elastic supply, but what is unitary elastic? Unitary elastic means elasticity equals to unity. Unity means 1, so PES would be equal to 1. That means that if you put it in the formula, the percentage change in quantity supply divided by the percentage change in price. So if the price goes up by 10%, let's say the quantity supply will also go up by 10%. So it's equal to 1, right? The PS equals to 1. So unitary elastic supply would occur when any given percentage change in the price would cause an equal percentage change in supply. So it's illustrated, and you illustrate a unitary elastic supply curve by any straight line that goes through the origin. So this is how you will draw a unitary elastic supply curve. You started from here, the origin, and go all the way up like this, right? Make sure that it is touching your origin, otherwise you will not be marked if in any case you're drawing it in the exam. Otherwise you won't really be drawing it in the exam, using this in the exam. In A levels you do use it, but not really for IGCSEs. But still, I think this is pretty much relevant, guys, for this video. Now in the next video we're going to be covering the factors affecting price elasticity of supply, and hopefully that would be our last video. I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Until then, take care.